childhood mystery was solved years after it happened. When I was 5, my family started making the 4-hour drive to my grandmother's house every third Sunday. The trips followed an odd pattern I didn't question until years later. Exactly 112 miles into our journey, our car would make a strange noise, and Dad would pull into Pinewood Rest Area with a sigh. Dad would mutter about the engine overheating again, saying it would take about an hour to cool down and fix. He'd suggest I play at the playground while he worked on it. This happened without fail from kindergarten through high school. Mom never seemed concerned, just nodded and pulled out her paperback while I raced to the slides. Dad would spend exactly 1 hour with his head under the hood, tools spread across the concrete. At age 12, I started noticing a middle-aged woman who always seemed to be at the playground when we arrived. Not always the same woman, but there was always someone sitting on the bench near the swings who smiled at me. I assumed they were travelers resting like us. When I was 14, we got a brand new car. I remember thinking our rest stop troubles would finally end. They didn't. The next trip, Dad pulled into Pinewood right on schedule, claiming something was wrong with the transmission. I caught Mom rolling her eyes, but she said nothing. At 16, I developed an interest in cars and offered to help Dad. He practically slammed the hood down, snapping at me to just go play before immediately apologizing. He explained he needed to focus. His hands were clean when we left an hour later. I started watching more closely. Dad barely touched the engine during these stops. He mostly stood there checking his watch. Once, I secretly timed him. We arrived at 10:17 a.m. At precisely 11:17, he closed the hood and called for me. When I left for college, the trips became less frequent for me, though my parents still visited Grandma monthly. During a call home my sophomore year, Mom mentioned casually that Dad's car broke down at Pinewood again the previous day. 20 years of mechanical problems at the exact same location seemed statistically impossible. Last December at 25, I decided to surprise my parents by meeting them at Grandma's for Christmas. I left early, planning to beat them there. On impulse, I pulled into Pinewood Rest Area, feeling nostalgic for the playground where I'd spent so many hours. The equipment looked smaller than I remembered. I sat on a swing, pushing myself gently with my foot. A gray-haired woman approached and sat on a nearby bench. She stated with certainty that I was Matt's daughter. When I nodded in surprise, she said she thought so because I had his eyes. She introduced herself as Ophelia. She said she'd been hoping to run into me someday. I asked how she knew my father. Ophelia explained that my dad had paid her to watch me play every month. When I asked why he would do that, she studied my face and realized I truly didn't know. She told me she'd worked at the Rest Area gift shop for decades. Dad had approached her when I was 5, asking if she'd keep an eye on me while I played, paying her $20 each time. At first, she thought he was just being careful, but then realized he was leaving during those times. When I asked where he was going, she explained that Douglas County Women's Correctional was just 2 miles down a service road behind the restrooms. My father, she said, never missed a visiting day in 15 years. I asked who he was visiting, and she told me it was his daughter, his first daughter. When I insisted I was his only daughter, she shook her head. Ophelia explained that my father had a daughter from before he met my mother. Ariana drove drunk after a party, hit another car head-on, and killed a father of 3. She received a 15-year sentence. When I asked why she was telling me this now, she explained that my father had stopped coming 2 years ago, likely because Ariana had been released. Ophelia thought I should know the truth about my father. I drove to Grandma's house in a fog. When I arrived, my parents were already there. Dad hugged me tight, immediately sensing something was wrong. I couldn't confront him with family around. That night, I found him alone in the kitchen. Without preamble, I asked who Ariana was. He whispered, asking how I found out. When I told him Ophelia had revealed everything, Dad sank into a chair. He confessed that before meeting my mother, he'd had a brief relationship with a woman named Lucy. When she got pregnant, she didn't want him involved. He respected her wishes but sent child support. Ariana called him for the first time, from jail. Dad explained that by then, he was married to my mother with a new family. He couldn't bear to tell her about his past, but couldn't abandon Ariana either. Those rest stop breakdowns were the only way he could visit without raising questions. I asked if this went on for years, and he confirmed that he never missed once. When I questioned why he didn't tell me when I got older, he looked down and admitted he was afraid I'd see him differently, as the father of a killer.